and I have the privilege to serve as the Director of Economic Development for York County. And we are very, very pleased to have you all here today for a lunch and learn. And before I go any further, let me just recognize the staff members. This is a cooperative effort by the Gloucester County Economic Development Office and the York County Economic Development Office. I think we're falling right in line with your topic today, right? Coopetition. Experiencing that a little right now. Let me acknowledge and recognize Sherry Spring, the Director of Economic Development for Gloucester, in the back of the room. And Sherry's able assistant, and Linda Evans, right there. I think a lot of you know. Let me introduce Melissa Davidson, in the back of the room, the Assistant Director of Economic Development. Come out, and also I'd like to recognize Gloria Serafini, who works with our office. You've met her at the front desk. I understand we're going to have another one of these in the future in Gloucester. So again, this is Coopetition, and thank you all for being here. Before I introduce our guest speaker, just a couple of housekeeping items. This is a historic building, a freight shed. It was actually built in the 30s to receive freight that came via the waterways before we had a lot of automobiles and roadways and the bridge, most importantly. And it used to sit over the water. And when we developed Riverwalk Landing here 11 years ago, we literally picked this building up, moved it off the waterfront, moved it over here, sat it down, and renovated it. And we used historic tax credits. It's a much longer story, very complicated. But because we did that, we couldn't change the building, so we couldn't put bathrooms in here. So if you need to use the restroom, you go out that door back there, that building straight across. You'll see it when you go out the door. If you look to your right, is where the restrooms are. I think most of you know this. There's drinks in the back and some desserts, and hopefully you brought yourself a lovely lunch to enjoy during this session. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Hanlon. She's actually Dr. Hanlon. Got her doctorate, actually her doctorate master's from George Washington. She also has a BA in biology and safety from Marshall University and is a certified Myers-Briggs type practitioner, ENFP. Just thought I'd let you know. In her present position, she is the Associate Director of the Hampton Roads Center for Virginia Tech, where she's responsible for engaging the community with the university's graduate, professional development, and lifelong learning programs. And I will tell you, I've had an opportunity to meet with Lisa on a number of occasions. She is extremely creative, very professional, and incredibly smart, which kind of scares me. So you are in, I think, for a great workshop today. Lisa has many other credentials, but in the interest of your time and getting this program underway, let me present Lisa Hanlon.
Thank you so much, and a big thanks to both of our local economic development authorities for hosting this event. We cooked this up a while back. Meeting with some of the economic development folks in our area is something that I do at Virginia Tech. Has anybody already known about our center in Newport News? Fairly new? Does anybody know that we have a presence in Newport News? No? Well, that's part of the reason why we do community outreach as well. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do at the center at the end of today. So, so welcome and thanks for being here. I hope that you learn a few things as we talk about coopetition. And like Jim said, this is kind of the embodiment of coopetition, having two neighborly economic development authorities join forces to host something like this for the businesses that they serve. So, coopetition, anyone have a guess at what that might mean? I'm a former school teacher and principal, so I kind of ask questions and do that kind of thing. Coopetition, what does that mean to you?
Unlikely partnerships.
Oh, that's great. Unlikely partnerships. That's a good one. Anybody else? I think we're going to just go with that. That's perfect. So unlikely partnerships. And we're going to talk about two case studies today. One is of a permanent nature and one is a little more temporary. So let's start out by looking at our two birds. So the early bird is going to catch the worm, right? And how early do you think that this little chicken on the right had to get up to beat the little chicken on the left? You see what he got? He's an overachiever, right? And competition can be very exhausting. Do you notice anything else about him? Maybe some extra time he took? His what? Oh, yeah, whatever that is, that hair, his plume. Yeah, so he was really working hard. Not only was he out there trying to catch a worm, which ended up being a snake, but he made sure that the hair and makeup people were on his team as well. So again, we're going to look at 2 case studies, and I'm going to start you off with a really easy question. Who is Virginia Tech's biggest rival? UVA. Are there any Hokies in the house? Yay! Are there any Who's in the house? Oh, okay, well, it's all good. I saw one Who out there. So the biggest rival for Virginia Tech is, of course, the University of Virginia. In 2006, there was a joint University of Virginia and Virginia Tech facility located in Richmond, Virginia. And that was, as the little flag shows, if you can see that, that was like a house divided. They shared the same space because it was really economically advantageous for them to do so. 1 copy machine, 1 phone bill, 1 rent. You share the classrooms, first come, first serve. But there wasn't a partnership. They were just sort of roommates, for lack of a better term. And it got so bad that when a student would come in, one of the people at the front desk would yell, "Virginia Tech, you've got a student up here." At that time, in 2006, 2 new regional directors were hired, and they decided they wanted to work on that culture because really, a student is just a student is just a student. And we're fortunate in Virginia to have so many wonderful state schools. So they really wanted to work on the culture there, and they wanted it to be whatever the student's question was, you could kind of be the first point of contact, no matter who you worked for. And they wanted it to be seamless. So maybe you couldn't tell the administrative assistants which school they worked for. So they were trying to be more unified, and they were doing some cross-training and some things like that. And then does anybody know what the significance of this date is?
That's the shooting.
Yeah, the shooting at Virginia Tech happened right after they started working together up in Richmond. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like a tragedy to really bring people together. It's a shame, but it really does rally people together. This is a picture of it. Where's my Who? There's a Who out there. This is Beta Bridge at the University of Virginia. The day that the shootings happened, they painted the bridge Who's for Hokies. Now, the significance of this bridge is that it was built in 1923 because the automobile was coming. So they were getting ready for the automobile. And it ended up being sort of a de facto place for students to place graffiti. And ever since it went up in 1923, it was painted on average 5 times a week. Students painted and painted. There's a dance coming up, they paint it again. There's an election coming up, they paint it again. Whatever's on their mind, it was their little place to paint at the University of Virginia. And I sincerely doubt that before this day, that bridge was ever painted maroon based on the competition between those 2 schools. But that year, that day, the students of UVA painted that bridge, and that bridge stayed painted the rest of the school year. And that's a real historic moment for University of Virginia to give such a nod to Virginia Tech. And the thought was being, today we are all Hokies. And so that really kind of sped along the camaraderie and the togetherness at the Richmond Center. And they really worked on becoming a House United. And that's what we call the flag in the offices now, the House United flags. So they started doing things for the greater good. They started having Hokies versus Who's food drives, because sometimes you can use competition for the greater good. So who can raise the most cans of food for the food bank? I mean, that's a fabulous way to have competition. They did a habitat house together. They figured out how to have a shared administrative position that they could both pay half-time salaries to, which I thought was really creative. And then they also decided to paint one wall in every classroom orange, because that's a shared color. So they were making great strides in trying to become more friendly to one another and work together. So then they decided these 2 regional directors decided to open up our center in Newport News. And it's another joint center. It's the University of Virginia, Virginia Tech Joint Center. And because they were able to open it from the start, they decided to do something that's practically unheard of, it's maybe totally unheard of. They decided to try to partner on academic offerings. Now, I tell you, it's easy to paint a wall orange, but when you have 2 huge state institutions like UVA and Virginia Tech, to try to do some joint programming together was a huge and a monumental task. And it can be painful at times. There's a real natural ebb and a real natural flow, and you've got to be happy for your partner. One's up, one's down. It kind of works like that. Another really hard thing is we had to sit down and admit our weaknesses. You know, where Virginia Tech shines in the engineering realm, University of Virginia may in the philosophical realm. So you have to sit down and figure out what are your sweet spots and what do you really want to focus on. The exciting thing about being partners is that everything costs half, right? But when you get the checks at the end of the day, it also you make half. So that's kind of a little oddity as well. So you can share the expenses for the food, but you share half of the revenue as well. Everything is easier. You've got twice the bench. You've got twice the pool of professors to choose from to help deliver your programs. But everything is harder too. Who pays who? You know, how does the contracting work? Who's in charge of the crediting? Who's in charge of the continuing education units? Who pays the bill for Panera to come in and cater? And then how do you divvy that all up at the end? So there are lots of little things that you have to think about in the back of your mind. But I'll tell you, the novelty is when UVA and Virginia Tech go to meetings together with different companies, it is quite the novelty. And sometimes people can't understand how we would ride in the same car together. Because I tell you what, people usually have a strong affinity for one of those organizations or the other. And although I work for Virginia Tech, I didn't graduate from Virginia Tech, but they've graciously started calling me a Fauxie, F-A-U-X. So I'm a Fauxie, but not a hokey. But somehow they tolerate me, even though I didn't graduate there. You never know if the CEO of a corporation is going to be a hokey or a who, or could be somebody, you know, from William & Mary. It could be anybody. So again, we're lucky to have so many wonderful state schools. And it's definitely a novelty. The success factors in trying to make Coopetition work are that you've got to have shared values. Those two regional directors talked about how do you treat students? How do you treat people? How do you want students to learn? You know, what are the takeaways? They wanted to be very intentional about the culture. They created like a Dirty Santa thing at Christmas time with both of the organizations. Jim mentioned the Myers-Briggs type indicator at the beginning. We all went through our types and found out what our types were so we could work better with one another and make sure all kinds of folks were represented on our teams. And we built on overlap. How can you use technology? You know, who pays for the clicker and who gets it first? And we really tried to understand each other's portfolios, because the nice thing is if I go to a meeting and UVA is not with me, I can tell you everything that they do because we sat and worked that out at the very beginning. So there's lots of symbols of our partnership. In addition to the orange wall, we have shared information tables. We use the House United terminology. We have joint academic programming that I will talk about in a minute. And we attend meetings together. And the most important thing is understanding that the relationships are just as important as the partnership. And again, I'll talk about that in a minute. Once you put the relationships first and the people first, it doesn't really matter what school colors you're wearing. So here is our center in Newport News. It's at the Wells Fargo building. Someday we'd like to call it the UVA Virginia Tech building, but for now it's the Wells Fargo building across from the IHOP. Does anybody know why the University of Virginia got to be on the top? I'm sorry? Alphabetical order. That was it, alphabetical order, yeah. There was a discussion about that. It was kind of funny. We do, although with that little flag, that house divided flag, one side has Virginia Tech on the top and the other side has UVA on the top, and sometimes we'll take it off the wall and switch it around just to mess with each other and tease each other. So that's kind of funny. So this is really the embodiment of Coopetition. Having those signs go up on the wall was a really fun day. We have delivered three joint programs in conjunction with University of Virginia. One of them was for emerging leaders at a large company, the bright shining stars that they've not been to graduate school or have an MBA, but they're rising stars in the company, and you want them to be ready when they're ready to take on leadership roles. You want them to learn about team building and having difficult conversations and how to do predictive analysis and things that they didn't learn when they became engineers, that type of thing. So that was one of the joint programs we had. The second one was called Fundamental Skills of Managers. And those were for newly appointed managers. It's sort of like a buddy to boss thing, where you used to be their friend and now you were so good at doing what you did that they've promoted you to manager. So we did how to read financial statements for them. We did a lot of communication skills, staff morale, human resources, all sorts of wonderful things for that. And then the third one was called Managing Through Emotional Intelligence. And the participants in that joint program went through an emotional intelligence analysis, and they learned about resilience and all those things that help make you a strong leader. That was a unique program because we did that one open enrollment. So we had, our intent was to work with smaller companies who could maybe send 1 or 2 people at a time and not fill up a whole cohort. So we had a lot of fun doing all 3 of those. And we share copy machine, classrooms, all of those kind of things. And on the slide before, if you remember, I said something about how important relationships are. So I want to give you a really good example of that. Up until last August, I actually worked for the University of Virginia. And when the posting came out for Virginia Tech, it was a promotion for me. And I thought about it, and I talked to my UVA boss, and she reluctantly supported my decision to apply for it. So I kind of switched teams, moved 5 offices down. And my University of Virginia boss really put the relationship first. And we're all still speaking to one another. My UVA colleague is on vacation in the Caribbean, or he would be with me today. So, so that's an example of how important the relationships can be. You never know, where you're going to end up. So now I can really represent both portfolios at meetings. So if you have any questions about UVA, I can answer those too. And that's a little bit about the coopetition among those 2 schools. And before I switch gears and talk about a temporary example of coopetition, I would just challenge you, if University of Virginia and Virginia Tech can come together and give out certificates that are jointly branded in a program that was taught half by UVA faculty, half by Virginia Tech faculty, I think anybody can work anything out. What was so wonderful, the company that we worked with for the certificate program that we did, when we were giving them out, they introduced me as being from the University of Virginia Tech. And so it was so seamless to them, they really didn't know which person was from which school and or anything like that. So that was our goal, and I think we were very successful. Okay, so let's totally switch gears and talk about an example of coopetition in the nonprofit arena. When I'm not working for one university or another, I founded a nonprofit called Gowns for Hounds, and that's actually a York County business. And no, it's really not dresses for dogs, I promise. What we do is we collect really gently loved prom gowns and wedding gowns, and we resell them to raise mini grants for the elderly who can't afford vet care that may normally have to put their pets to sleep. And this came about when my dogs, anybody have pets? Yeah, they're like family members, aren't they? And when he went through a really lengthy, expensive disease, and I was very lucky that we were able to do everything for him until he had to be put down. I just got to thinking how sad it would be if you were elderly and you couldn't afford like insulin shots and all that pills and all those kind of things. So my daughter had just gone to college, and there were 5 gowns up in the closet, and I thought, well, I could sell these and start making money. And I now have 2,000 gowns in my house. So the community has been amazingly generous. So it's been quite a success. And not to digress, but talking about working with volunteers, that's a whole nother animal. And we are all a sea of volunteers with Gowns for Hounds. So our challenge is constantly developing a new customer base, because you go to prom and then you graduate from high school, right? And then we got to get new customers all over again. So same thing with the wedding gowns. You get married, and hopefully you won't need another one of those for a while. But we do have a challenge in recreating our customer base. And so one day I saw a little ad from the SPCA, and everybody's heard of the SPCA, right? And they were having a fur ball, which was their big fundraiser for the year. So, click, click. They're going to need gowns, and they're a different age, and the fur ball's every year, and. So I just kind of spontaneously called them and said, hey, would you like to do a joint fundraiser together? And I don't know if they thought I was nuts, but I got an audience. And so I said, yeah, let's figure this out. We'll do it together, and we'll give you 20% of all the sales. And you help us with the volunteers, because this is a very part-time charity. They're a full-time charity with employees. So if you can help us with the volunteers, And they said, well, we can help you with the venue because they have board of directors, members. We ended up having it Ferguson Enterprises. They were able to get the venue for us. And we'll give you 20% of the proceeds because we have all the inventory. So the risk was, everybody who loves animals, you have just so many dollars to donate. So, you're going to give to one or you're going to give to the other, but you're not going to give it to both. And they were willing to, take that chance and share with us, their email lists and all those kind of things. And what that did for Gowns for Hounds was really phenomenal. It expanded our customer base because you're going to the fur ball, maybe you have a daughter who's going to the prom or homecoming or something like that. And it was a whole nother customer. It was people my age who were going to formal events. It gave us fresh volunteers. They got us the venue, and as a result, our February 20th sale broke all of our prom gown sales records to date since 2012. So it was a huge success, and the girls had so much fun. And there's a club at Christopher Newport who support the SPCA club. And so the SPCA got them to come to my house, which is now like a big storage unit, and choose the gowns that they thought would sell. And so, because you can't really take 2,000 gowns to a sale, trust me, it's really hard. But we picked about 500 gowns and we took them to Ferguson, and it was all fresh and new and fun for them, right? Because for me, I've seen them a million times now, but for the girls, it was a lot of fun. So it was really, really, really a huge win-win. And the SPCA even put a little mannequin in their center with a gown on it with a little flyer about this sale to kind of pique interest. So that's an example of how two charities who are competing for the same donor dollars can partner to really make a difference. And it made them feel good, and I think some people got some beautiful gowns. Their president of the SPCA was the first person who bought a gown there, and she was going to wear her gown to the fur ball. So that was a lot of fun. So now, let's see what we got. Now you got to find your own frenemies, right? Think in your mind, who is your biggest competitor? And to figure this out, whose services and products are the most like yours? Is it Gloucester and Yorktown economic development? Is it two rival universities? Who's competition to you? Whose services and products are almost like yours? Who have you always got your eye on? And what do they do better than you? Because you're going to do something better than them. So you're going to do something better than them. They're going to do something better than you. And what would happen if you could partner to bring the best of both worlds together and kind of put aside that competitive nature? You really have got to get clear on the mutual benefits of the what's in it for me, and that takes a lot of bravery. And it's fun to call personally to set up a face-to-face meeting. Think of who would just like drop the phone if you called them. Who's this? What do you want to do? It's just a lot of fun to have an exploratory conversation. That's just a little bit of time. And it's always nice to create a pilot program that's not as threatening. So, that's really what we did with the SPCA. Let's do a pilot. Let's see if it's successful for us. And it was very fun for me to be able to take them the check for the 20% and got our picture taken and everything like that. So those are some of the premises on finding your own frenemies. And another great example of this is Olympic mania is starting to happen. We're getting ready to watch the Olympics very soon. They're upon us. I recently, maybe 6 months ago, watched the movie called Race, the track movie. Did you see that? It's really good. If you haven't seen it, it's probably in Redbox by now. But it was about Jesse Owens' quest to be absolutely the greatest track and field athlete in history. And if you can imagine the pressure that Jesse Owens faced going to the 1936 Hitler Olympics, it was a really powerful movie. When he went to jump the long jump, his competition was a German whose last name was Luz, L-U-Z. And Luz went and he got his long jump measurement, and then Jesse Owens went and he scratched. He went over the line. And then Luz did his second jump and he went even further. And then Jesse Owens went and he scratched again and went over the line. And it wasn't looking good for Jesse. And so Luz went for the third time. And then he walked around and he put his handkerchief down before the line so that Jesse would have something to look at before he jumped. They couldn't even speak the same language, and they would talk about competitors in every sense of the word. So when Jesse came up, he jumped where the handkerchief was, and he set the world record and won the gold. And so that's true coopetition. When you want to beat somebody, but only if you're the best. So it was just a very touching movie, and there's room for all of us there. Coopetition really allows for a much farther reach, and it's really, really fun. So I'm so proud to be the associate director at Virginia Tech. I do the Newport News Center and the Virginia Beach Center as well. I try to stay over on this side since I'm a Yorktown resident as much as I can, but we do some really exciting things. We have local government certificate programs that Yorktown's own Neil Morgan is going to teach for us in the fall on one of the courses out of the Newport News Center. So that's a lot of fun. And it's a graduate certificate program, so if it's something where you don't want to get a master's degree, but you really want to learn about economic development, it's a great certificate program to have. My favorite is the custom education, because I'm a former school teacher and principal, so I love working with companies to develop curriculum that's just for their employees, with or without UVA. And we do engineering programming. We're starting a master's in principal preparation for school teachers in the fall. We do meetings and conferences, lunch and learns, and another favorite part is this. This is under the Outreach and International Affairs Division, and so it's our job to bring our land-grant university to Virginia. So we get to do a lot of engagements like this where we just come out and share knowledge and talk about different concepts and things like that. So thank you for having me today. In closing, and I'll take any questions that you might have, we've got a little dog talking to the little fish, and he says, you make a really good point. We both hate the cat, but I'm just not sure what you bring to the partnership. So embrace that idea, figure out what one another can bring to the table, and I would challenge you to try Coopetition, just one phone call, and see what it does for you. So I'd be delighted to take any questions, and thanks.